Colleagues, let me go ahead and start the proceedings then. My name is Alan Fox. I'm the Deputy Director at the Independent Evaluation Office of UNDP, and we're very pleased that all of you are joining us for this webinar, where we are going to do a bit of a follow-up reflection on UNDP's work in the energy space. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction here to get us all going. And then I'll be coming back later to open up a question and answer period. So we have, let me just give you a quick run of show. We have our director, Isabelle Messier, who is the head of the Independent Evaluation Office for UNDP. She'll do some initial opening remarks. We will then have Riyad Madeb, who is the director for the Sustainable Energy Hub at the Bureau of Program and Policy Support, BPPS, at UNDP. He'll make some brief remarks as well. We have Ben Murphy, who is the evaluation specialist, who we are very pleased had an opportunity to make this reflection report, and he'll be talking us through some of the key points. We have Edwin Kari, who is the Deputy Resident Rep for UNDP Philippines. Very pleased, Edwin, that you were with us. He'll talk about some of the experiences that we've had in the Philippines in terms of energy access and support. We will then have Shamiso Kasalenga, who is from a program analyst, who is our UNDP Malawi colleague. And she'll also be presenting some of the experiences and sharing of the energy access work that we've had in Malawi. We'll then have some time for a question and answer. We will be running time for this is about an hour. So hopefully you all have the energy and patience to work through with us what we think is not only a dynamic work of UNDP in the energy space, but also a pleasure for us to be able to utilize our systems and analysis to be able to identify what are some of the key insights and reflections from that work. Without further ado, let me pass the baton to Isabelle, and she'll go ahead and introduce today's work. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar of the IEO Reflection Series. As many of you already know, this series is designed to lift out and synthesize the most compelling lessons on a topic from the 6,000 plus evaluations that are in our Evaluation Resource Center. The topics selected are intended to be of relevance to UNDP programming, and we have intentionally been very timely with this one. I imagine we all took note of the call to action that came out of the recent SDG 7 stock taking, and so I hope this paper gives us some more concrete examples of how we respond to it. This paper we're launching today actually breaks some new ground for the reflection series because it's the first time we've updated a reflection paper. The energy paper was first created using the evidence that existed up to 2020, and the same team has now expanded it to include evidence that was created between 2020 and 2023. So in this way, we're starting to keep the reflection papers live and in step with the latest evidence and UNDP's new initiatives. So we're trying to include and update our work. There'll always be a slight lag, of course, because reflections papers, because it does take a time for an evaluation to run its course. But this team has worked alongside the energy community of practice and other learning groups to identify which evidence responds to today's challenges. For those that have become familiar with the reflection series, you'll also see this updated paper comes in our new format. And I hope you like it. I really like it. It's designed to make the papers visually compelling and therefore more accessible as you work through these topics. This webinar is an opportunity for us to share. As Alan mentioned, Ben Murphy is with us. He's the evaluation specialist at IEO who worked on this, and he'll be presenting it to you. I really hope that this sparks some discussion on how we can progress towards universal energy access. We have Riyad Madeb, the director of the Sustainable Energy Hub of BPPS, who will introduce the Energy Hub's work towards SDG 7. We have Edwin Carrier, the Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP Philippines, and Shumiso Kasialenga, Program Analyst from UNDP Malawi, for joining, who will join us and share their experiences of working towards increasing energy access. So that's my short intro. I'll pass the floor to Riyad. Riyad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isabel. It's a real pleasure joining you today, and I'm happy that we have also Noura Hamlaji, our Deputy Director of Regional Bureau of Africa, joining us, and Dario Lugatti, who is the Head of Energy in the United Nations Commission for Europe. Also joining us. And today we convene under the auspice of UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, guided by the exemplary leadership of Isabelle Mercier. Thank you, Isabelle, for steering the Reflection Series, a platform where we transform insight into action and that refine our strategies and our operation. And we are here today to discuss a subject close to all our heart here, and many actors here who are part of it, is expanding access to sustainable energy. And this aligns with our bold ambition in the 2022-2025 strategic plan, focusing on making sustainable energy accessible to millions more worldwide. And over 675 million people worldwide still lack of access in electricity, and 2.3 billion people still lack of access to clean cooking, with many more relying on traditional, inefficient, and harmful energy sources for their daily needs. To respond to these challenges, UNDP has developed a new approach that goes beyond conventional project development and going beyond from the pilot, scaling up our pilot to big initiatives that respond to the moonshot. And it aims at amplifying exponentially the impact of sustainable energy system transformation on the ground. And let me outline three key initiatives that for us are important. First, our energy moonshot tracker. And this initiative tools is enhancing how we monitor and evaluate our energy project globally by tracking both the reach and impact of our initiative. These tools enable us to see real-time progress across 118 countries in 330 initiatives ongoing currently. It's not just about numbers, it's about real-life change by better energy access. This is the first time that UNDP has data mapping on vertical, non-vertical fund project, and our results so far shows encouraging progress, which with active projects during the period of the strategic plan 22-25, targeting 100 million direct beneficiaries and at least 100 million more indirect beneficiaries from output supporting energy access and just energy transition. We started that with the Regional Bureau of Africa with Noura, and we expanded it to all the regions. Second, the Sustainable Energy Academy, recognizing the need for expertise in energy transformation. This academy is pivotal. It is designed to equip our country offices and their local partners with the knowledge and tools to drive change. And through targeted training and technical assistance, the Academy fosters the implementation of effective and sustainable energy solution. Finally, our approach to market development. We are actively working to cultivate a pipeline of viable energy projects. I think our colleagues from Malawi and Philippines will talk about it. This involves understanding developing markets so that investment can flow more freely and more significantly. By focusing on creating bankable projects, we aim to boost annual investment in sustainable energy, propelling us toward the 2025 goals of 500 million people access to clean, sustainable, and affordable energy, and accelerating the energy transition. Just this week, UNDP work in this area was acknowledged by the G7 leadership in its ministerial meeting in Turin just 2 days ago. Additionally, our regional energy strategies and thought leadership work are shaping how regions tackle energy challenges. And by tailoring our approach to specific needs, of different areas, we ensure that our strategy are not only effective, but also inclusive. And colleagues, as we discuss and reflect today, let's keep our focus on the practical and transformative changes we are championing. Thank you all for dedicating and hard work, and let's continue to push forward all together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Riyad. I'm just going to project my screen. I think it should be visible now. That's great. Okay. So thank you very much all for joining. I'm just going to give you a few highlights of this paper, this updated paper, I should say. As Isabel mentioned, we first produced this paper in 2020, but then and at that time UNDP was launching its energy moonshot around that moment, and we've taken stock of the evidence that's come in since that point. And actually, since that moment, globally the energy sector has obviously changed quite significantly, but really in the areas that UNDP is working to establish, particularly off-grid energy and in the particular types of contexts, many of the factors that we see in the evaluation still remain very relevant. And I'm pleased to say that in this new paper, we've got some early evidence from some of the new initiatives that UNDP has launched in the meantime. Just to give you a quick sense of what is in the paper overall, and it should be with you in your sign up to this webinar, but it's also on our Evaluation Resource Center. The paper has 9 lessons from these particular contexts where there is a low availability of electricity or clean forms of cooking. So what I guess we should say is that UNDP obviously does a lot of work in contexts where there is a good amount of energy access already to transition away from those. We haven't focused on that in this reflections paper. We've really looked at efforts towards ensuring more people have a clean form of energy. And the evidence is drawn from 52 evaluations of UNDP, a lot of project evaluations, some of our country program evaluations, and 1 or 2 thematics. And you'll see those in the references for the paper itself. And if you want to go and look at any of those evaluations, they're all hyperlinked through, and that'll take you through to where the evidence has come from. And from that, we developed these 9 lessons, or updated these 9 lessons. The first one is broadly around, confirming the relevance of what UNDP is doing, in particular in contexts where there is a desperate need for energy. And the evaluations confirm that both from Leave No One Behind perspective, but also from, relevance in a context where the energy sector may be actually rapidly expanding, where the grid may be reaching out, and there's still a need for off-grid energy, in particular in rural areas. And then the rest of the findings are on project design components, spanning right from the start, from barrier analysis through to kind of gender dynamics and setting these realistic targets. The 5 that I'm just going to quickly highlight in a bit more detail are the ones you should see on the screen now. And I've picked these because, as Reid was mentioning, it's not just about establishing or introducing a new energy technology. What UNDP does is there to seek to try and build a sustainable solution, and one that contributes to people's livelihoods and ultimately to development. So I'm just going to talk through these 5 in slightly more detail. The first 2 I've brought together because they're right at the very start of the process, the project design process. And they're about creating a realistic plan for how the energy sector may develop or how it may change, and who is at the table to inform that assessment. So the first is about barrier analysis and assessing kind of what is holding back the energy sector from making progress. And the evaluations or the evidence that we've seen kind of suggest that this is a kind of a mixed tool, or the usage of this tool of barrier analysis is relatively mixed. I'm not going to say it's kind of make or break for a project, but where where something has gone right or something has gone wrong in a project, often the evaluation traces it back to the quality of this initial barrier analysis. And the projects that have done it very well have actually used it to create a kind of a long-term plan for how the sector may develop, but also a near-term realistic assessment of what they think they may be able to influence or what needs to be changed within, say, a 4 or 5 year project window, and then ultimately what might be dependent on, say, a follow-on project, or where they need others to come in. Where projects have done it less well, it's tended to kind of led to perhaps interventions that are too advanced for the context, or missed partnership opportunities with other, say, national energy initiatives. So the classic example of these is maybe introducing a brilliant technology which doesn't have a market surrounding it to take it up or invest their interest. And that leads to the second point, which is, obviously for a larger system of energy, there's still a relatively large upfront cost. And in the examples that we've reviewed, the public funding from the government or from UNDP is obviously a great catalyst to that process, but it rarely kind of transfers to a kind of a private or a community-owned model within kind of one program cycle. And so it's bringing potential investors along in the process has been very helpful to set expectations for when we may see change in the energy sector, and also to identify things that perhaps in the barrier analysis may not have been included. So there's interesting examples from UNDP's work in Rwanda and Uganda, where investors were brought into the barrier analysis, and it identified a host of things around the investor's access to loans, and so you can start addressing those things alongside building an energy technology or a demonstration site. The next two findings, or the next two lessons, speak to this point around ensuring that energy access is leading to development outcomes, was firstly sustained and then leading to development outcomes. And I think these speak to kind of an assumption that was maybe kind of prevalent in some of the earlier evaluations, whereby the fact of having an electricity supply on its own was seen to be inevitably good, which obviously it is, but it's perhaps necessary but not sufficient to catalyze the development outcomes that UNDP wants to see. So the first lesson that we drew from that is that the off-grid initiatives should consider how the energy users assess the associated financial costs of these, either the electricity supply, but also the systems and the maintenance of the systems. And perhaps Shamiso may talk to that in her presentation. There is some very interesting examples from Indonesia and elsewhere, where energy projects have actually tailored their payment scheme to what is possible for community members, what is a realistic contribution that they may make to pay for their energy supply and the maintenance of the system. And then several evaluations actually highlight the community contribution to projects, which I think often goes slightly overlooked. And that contribution might be in the form of labor in terms of setting up and maintaining the system, but it could also be in the form of land, committing land to, say, a solar field or for another form of system. So there's an acknowledgement in these evaluations that that has been an important process in ensuring the success of the project. Lesson 7 is about planning for the development benefits, and not necessarily assuming that once there's a connection that development will ensue. And the good examples in here, I think Cuba is one, where energy has been, and supply of energy has been connected into existing livelihoods, existing technologies or existing income streams of communities, and it's how to, you know, to improve processes. Where projects have struggled with this, it's typically where they've tried to establish a novel form of electricity and a novel form of a new livelihood at the same time. And it's been quite difficult to do both things and ensure both things are successful within a project lifetime. And so in a couple of these projects, you see perhaps, you know, each of these two components falling behind because it's just consumed the project in trying to get them both off the ground. I think some projects also have struggled to find a balance between maybe household energy access, which is perhaps better for poorer groups, but has kind of less productive input, and then community access, which is obviously more expensive, but does have that contribution to livelihoods. The last lesson that I'm going to just talk through quickly before I hand over to Edwin is number 8, which is, again, not assuming that the gender benefits of energy will materialize, and in fact there should be kind of a deeper look into the social norms. And I know that actually since this paper was first produced, UNDP has done a lot more in this regard in terms of the connections between energy and gender. And we split this into two lenses. One is on the usage of energy, and kind of not relying on the assumption that any time saved through reduced wood collection or other ways would ultimately be, you know, a gender boost, because it can quite quickly be filled with more domestic work, or any extra income from, say, women's businesses may quickly be absorbed into the household budgets or captured other ways. So a call for kind of a closer look as we develop these projects into how women will benefit from the energy access. The second component of this lesson is actually the wider sector, and I think this is evident from a lot of the evaluations, particularly on the larger scale energy, where there's an acknowledgement that it's a very male-dominated sector, and so through capacity building support, particularly where there's an involvement, say, of a national academy, UNDP has done quite a bit to encourage more female participation, both in, say, engineering roles around energy, but also there is a call from in the countries you see on the screen there for their engagement in more managerial roles in the sector. I think this perhaps may be a slower moving change, but nonetheless a very important one. I'm going to pause there. You see on the screen, for those that don't have the paper yet, there is some details here, and I think Anna will also share in the chat. And with that, I'll hand over to Edwin. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ben. Very interesting chat. Can you see my screen? Is my screen visible now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. So I am going to run through 2 or 3 examples of practical applications of renewable energy access in the Philippines, especially for remote communities. Philippines is basically a country in a transition, in an economic transition, still recovering from COVID, but still very good economic growth. Population growth is also very high, 1.6% population growth per year. So all of this is definitely driving the energy demand up, and there will be a need at some point for sort of critical solutions to this problem. Electrification rate is actually quite good, more than north of 90%. So it's not the 100% of Thailand or the Singapore, but still you have a plus 90% electrification rate. But this leaves more than 2.5 million households without electricity access. Currently, the goal of the country through their energy plan is to increase the renewable energy mix, the renewable energy segment in their energy mix to 50% by 2040. So there are issues related to the cost of energy, issues related to access and reliability. And looking also at the Philippines geography, you have more than 7,800 islands. Some of these islands have millions of people living in them. Some of these islands are, in remote communities, you have like 50 people living in them. So investment, in infrastructure for access to energy is quite a complex problem. So the three key examples I'm going to take is from our DREAMS project, which stands for the Renewable Energy Applications and Market Sustainability. We have, through this project, it was very ambitious, but by the way, we are estimating that we will be avoiding 30 million tons of GHG in lifetime emissions, still to be confirmed by our people on the ground. So first of the three examples is in the Palawan province. Palawan is a highly touristy place in the Philippines, and in the meantime, you still have those barangays, those neighborhoods, which are still not connected to the grid. So this project picked one of these neighborhoods, and we experimented with two elements. A smart grid system for household electrification. We were able to provide electricity to 120 households, but also a solar-powered irrigation pump. This pump was handed over to the Farmers Association and has been a boon for their livelihoods. So in terms of impact, of course, there was first providing electricity 24/7 to a neighborhood where there was none, and second, also the support to the Farmers Association to this very remote place, an hour and a half away from the next urban center. If you want to know what Palawan looks like, this is, this paradise. But try to imagine, in each of these islands, you have like 50, 30 people living. And if you're trying to do an electricity network on all of these blocks, so how much effort and investment that would look like. I will come back to this at the end of my presentation. Number two, our attempt to connect service delivery to citizens. In particular, we were able to install solar power panels in a hospital in the Iloilo province in the Visayas. Philippines, you have three big group of islands: Luzon, with Visayas, and the Mindanao. Iloilo is in the Visayas. So through the installation of solar panel, we were able to do basically two things. In terms of cost, lower the cost of electricity by 40% for the hospital, thereby freeing budget for the hospital to invest in equipment for additional service to citizens. But also the renewable energy, the solar power, was meant not to power up the whole hospital, but only critical services, maternity ward and the surgery block. The idea is because of the frequent power outages in Iloilo, for example, during typhoons, during any calamity, and also because of the cost of diesel, we wanted to address both issues at the same time. So, of course, longer-term benefit is the reduction in GHG, which was also achieved. As we can see very quickly, I'm going to show you, the solar panels that we installed on top of the hospital. The third example that I'm going to run through is also, it's in Camarines, it's in the Luzon, the largest group of islands. We have looked at the key issue in Camarines, which was the persistent shortage of water. So installation of 10 solar power potable water systems with 192 taps. So looking at basically the installation, what we're able to do is, of course, improve the access to clean water, but also saving time. A lot of the women in this community, they were walking very long distances to fetch water back and forth between the households. So we were also able to provide this sort of fresh, good quality water, but also improve household dynamics. Women get to spend more time with their families, a more cost-effective solution. So we were actually satisfied. Those are, we believe, how can I say this, for these small communities, those investments are very impactful. But looking now at sort of the big picture, and I'm going to come back to some of the things that you mentioned, Ben. In this project, the DREAM projects, we were extremely ambitious. The plan was to provide free or next to free electricity to 20,000 households. At the end of the day, with the $5 million that we got from the GEF, we were able to connect 350 households to off-grid energy, and also 12,000 households for indirect. For example, going to the hospital where there is now renewable energy, going to government buildings, going to schools. So the direct and indirect is basically half of what we were planning to provide on direct access. Number two, the costs. Of course, in a pilot project, it is okay for a project to invest, of course, in it's an important initial investment. And those local communities, many of them are living basically at the poverty line. It's very difficult for them to do this investment. And we have seen this in solar. Even solar power is not very cheap. On the other hand, the batteries are also, you have to invest a little bit. Or we also notice the same problem with the transport, with the electric vehicles. When transport cooperatives were trying to change their vehicle park into EVs, the main obstacle was the investment. So this brings me really to the three observations that if I can put it like this. The discussion on access to renewable energy is not isolated. It's a discussion about economics. It's a discussion about engagement with the private sector and being able to make a business case. You have to think of things like insurance, for example. One of the systems that we have installed in Palawan, there was a fire and the whole investment was lost. So the issue of investment, the issue of insurance, it becomes important. The issue of training also local communities for the maintenance of this equipment. Solar panels can be set up and dismounted. It's a few hours. You have a typhoon that's coming. You dismount 6 hours. You have put everything somewhere, and in 48 hours it's back up and running. So that definitely that's a plus. On the other hand, after 5 years, 6 years, how are these local communities going to deal with those batteries, or basically sitting there? How do they recycle? So those are basically the pilot projects for small scale. That was actually a positive investment. But once you look at expanding the scope of the investment, there are a lot of practical issues that get in the way of, and it's beyond the access to energy. It's economic, it's politics, it's social. So there's a lot of consideration that needs to be taken into consideration for a successful project and for a sustainable investment also in the energy sector. I am going to stop it there. And off to Shamiso.
Merci, Edwin. Let me just quickly jump to my presentation. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're joining in from. So as I've already been introduced, I'm Shamiso, and I'm based in the Malawi country office. So just to give a very, very brief introduction of Malawi, being mindful of time. Malawi is a landlocked country in the southern of Africa. We've got current population of about 20 million, but out of that 20 million, unfortunately, only 12% are connected to the national grid. So this is the main basis of a lot of our programming within UNDP Malawi. So just to quickly walk you through some of the major projects that we have, in terms of overall, we've got the Access to Clean and Renewable Energy project, which has 4 outputs focusing on the expansion of clean energy in rural areas with a focus on productive use. We've also done significant work in terms of supporting the Ministry of Energy in terms of frameworks and legislation. We did support the revision, and we do support the implementation of the national energy policy. We supported the development of the national renewable energy strategy, and we supported the Bureau of Standards with renewable energy testing equipment under this. We are also participating in the Africa Mini-Grids program. And through this, we've done quite a lot of work, again, with the Ministry of Energy and the Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority in terms of looking at de-risking of renewable energy investments. And we're also looking at a lot of training, such as the geomapping and geospatial training that is capacitating the Ministry of Energy and all the other institutions involved in the energy section, in the energy sector, to create an enabling environment. So just to give you a brief run through in terms of some of the systems we've installed and are currently installing. I won't focus too much on this, again, being mindful of time, and I'll just choose 2 examples out of this list to focus on, just to walk you through some of the successes that we've had and some of the challenges that we're currently facing. So let me jump to the acronym is MEGA. Mulanje is in the southern region of Malawi. So this is the Mulanje Electricity Generation Agency. So it's a mini hydro system that we supported on the Chenya River, and it currently generates up to 220 megawatts. Currently connecting 2,120 households, 2 health centers, schools, and several maize mills. So just to give you a picture of some of the work that we've done, looking at the health centers, these were health centers that had no access to electricity, and women were forced to give birth under candlelight. So now with the system, it's a situation that has vastly improved. And just to highlight in terms of some of the successes we've had with MEGA is the potential of this river that the system sits on. Currently, like I've said, it's generating 220, but it has the capacity to generate up to 4.5 megawatts. And this is something that we've been working with MEGA on in terms of helping them develop their proposals to expand even further. And I don't know if you know much about Malawi, but last year we suffered quite a severe cyclone in February. And because of the cyclone, we as a country actually had a national blackout for about 48 hours. But a lot of people came in with testimonies from Mulanje saying, even while the rest of the country was in a blackout, we were still able to access electricity in our community. Moving on to the second example, this is supported under the Africa Mini-Grids program in collaboration with Self-Help Africa. So these are 2 solar micro grids of 12 and 10 kilowatts in the same district. And again, just a pictorial focus in terms of some of the successes we've enjoyed. But one thing I really wanted to highlight with this one was the fact that through this program, we've also been able to pilot Powering Gender Equality, which focuses on bringing a gender focus in terms of not just UNDP programming, but also the national energy agenda. And this has been incorporated into the Renewable Energy Act, which will be finalized this year. I know we're out of time. There's so much I would have loved to share in terms of some of the challenges, some of the successes that we've faced. Perhaps this is something that we can talk to during the Q&A. So we do have a documentary for those who have time on the on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and type in UNDP Malawi Access to Energy, it will give you a little bit more in depth about some of what I've briefly shared today. And hopefully we can keep the conversation going. So for now, I'll stop there. And Alan, I'll hand it over to you.
Shamiso, many thanks, and of course to Edwin as well for the examples that both of you have been able to provide. I think it gives a great context for us to understand the work that's ongoing in the Philippines and also in Malawi. Colleagues, the floor is open for questions, and I think we've already seen in the chat that Anna has indicated to everybody that you can do one of two things. You can raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask a question. You can also put something into the chat that we can then read out and have our colleagues who made the presentations today to be able to try to answer. We have 15 to 20 minutes, and so I think that gives us a little bit of time, and if people are relaxed on their busy schedules, we can go maybe a little bit over, but we certainly want to be timely in our responses to each of the questions. I had one that had come up that had been put in the Q&A from Dick Tinsley. He's asked about whether there's been attention, whether persons have taken a look at how improved energy access can reduce the kind of drudgery work, domestic drudgery work that many women are facing in smallholder communities, and providing an opportunity then for reducing the amount of time to go and get water collection or fuel collection. And then his question then was, have we been able to see this work go on, and also the opportunities for then their better engagement on farming and other activities? So certainly would appreciate any comments you have on that. While you're thinking about that, I have an additional question I would like to pose, and that is that we know that the energy the energy needs in many countries far outstrips the capacity to pay for it using government funding. And we have to move to a private sector approach as much as possible. And we know that UNDP has been active in trying to de-risk projects by finding ways that we can, improve an understanding of the capacity for those projects to take place and the financial opportunities for them. So I would propose that if you have any examples or some ways that you can give us information on how that de-risking effort is moving forward, and how it's been useful, for instance, in the Philippines or in Malawi, that also would be appreciated. I'm gonna go, there's another hand up, because what I'll do is try to get 3 questions in, or 3 comments in, and then we'll turn to you. And so Nora, your hand is up. Would you please go ahead and take the floor as well for a question to pose? Nora Hamlaji, are you coming online? You may have to give her access to speak. I don't know whether that's been... she can't activate the mic. If Anna, you can help allow Nora the floor.
I'm working on it. I was just given access. Yeah, sorry, perfect. I could not activate. Okay. Good morning. Thank you all for the presentation, and thanks for Malawi as well, since we are the RBA. just, you know, three observations, and maybe Alan, to go a bit counter a little bit what you've just said about the private sector investment. When we look, you know, there is one main thing I didn't see in terms of lessons that will be useful for us in the context of Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, is the issue of scale. So out of, you know, roughly the 700 million people that we have that do not have access to electricity, 600 million are in Africa. So the scale is really an issue and something that we need to look at. I mean, pilots here and there are okay, but we do have a moonshot as UNDP in terms of giving access to a certain number of people during the strategic plan. And really the game changer for development in Africa is access to energy at scale. Now, having said that, how do we reach scale? So that's where we don't have much lessons there. And would be helpful to hear if you had anything coming out of the evaluations. And what kind of investment, and this is where I go back, especially in the context of leaving no one behind, looking at the poorest, giving access to the poorest in very hard to reach area. I'm talking about, you know, tropical forests, for instance, in the Congo Basin, where you'll have very difficulty to make a business case. So in terms of investment, whether the public investment, at least in an initial stage, could be prioritized rather than, you know, sticking to a private investment that is extremely difficult to de-risk in some areas. Also, do we have some examples of reaching universal electricity access with private sector investment? I don't have an example of those. Simply because it's so costly and it's so risky at first that public investment goes first. I mean, I have, you know, some of the example, but if you have others where we reach universal access with private sector, that will be useful. I don't know of any. So, you know, it's all around the issue of how to reach scale would be useful. Now, the last point is on the observation 7. On the development benefits that needs to be planned rather than assumed. I think the notion of transformation will be interesting, and how access to electricity in some area, especially hardest to reach area, can be transformational. Again, in the context of sub-Saharan Africa, you have on average most than half of the population in rural areas. And rural areas are typically where you have the less access to energy. Malawi, we heard 10%. Burkina Faso, it goes to up to 3%. Burundi, it's 3% as well. So you see, it's almost nobody having access. So I think, you know, this idea of how access to energy can be transformational for many communities, and actually for majorities of communities in sub-Saharan Africa. So this notion of scale, investment, and then transformation will be useful. Thank you.
Nora, thank you very much. So, colleagues, we turn it back to our panelists. We've given you 3 questions and then several follow-on, not only ideas but also suggestions from Nora. You have the floor for a response, please.
Maybe if I just come in first, tackling it from what we have in the paper, I think to Nora's point, specifically on scale, I think I think the findings or the lessons from this paper are all really about kind of scaling up from quite, you know, an assured point, but also having a kind of a realistic sense of when scale may be achieved, and that an acknowledgement that it's not likely to kind of happen within one project, and therefore coming up with the plan for what you might do within that project cycle, but then what you do longer term, and also where you need others to come into that that space to bring in their investment, and when they might start to see, potential investment opportunities, and also what conditions they need to see in the rest of the enabling environment to ensure that their investments won't be as risky as they are at the start of the project. And that's, I think, part of the what's behind this lesson on bringing investors along in the process. So you can have an open discussion around, what you're trying to do with this particular project, what they need to see in terms to have the confidence to put their money in, and when they might be able to see a return on that. And I think also there's an acknowledgement in the paper that where access to energy has been achieved, it hasn't been a kind of a quick shot. The energy sectors have developed over several decades, and I can imagine in some of the most rural areas, it's probably going to take at least on that time period or even longer. But I just also want to flag, and perhaps Shimiso might want to pick it up on the question of scale, around what UNDP's role is in terms of reaching scale. So I know that in Malawi, the country office there has done, from its pilot projects, from these small sites like Malanje through Mega, have actually built the enabling environment or the national policies for how renewable energy and off-grid energy should be ruled out nationally. And that was actually taken up by, or will be used by, the World Bank as through their, I'm not sure where their investment has gone, Shimiso, whether it's come online yet, but through UNDP support, it's created the conditions that say how renewable energy should be rolled out nationally. And so the World Bank projects comply with those and bring that into its program. So it's not necessarily about UNDP providing all the resources to take something to the scale. It may be a lighter touch that has more national implications. So I'll stop there and hand to Shimiso or Edwin.
Yeah, I think I can just come in and continue to talk where you've left off in terms of scalability. So the work in UNDP Malawi is, and you mentioned it in your presentation earlier, Ben, is that of a catalytic nature. We want to set up a business case to make renewable energy projects viable for other organizations, whether it's private investors or development partners, to be able to step in and also be able to scale, since that's the current discussion topic that we're focusing on. And this has indeed been the case when it comes to mini-grids. And some of the work, of course, I didn't dwell on some of the work that we've done with solar home systems, but these are some of the things that we were able to demonstrate in our projects. And like you've said, World Bank were able to scale up on a much larger basis. So we've got the World Bank also developing mini-grid projects and also distributing solar home kit systems on a very massive scale. And as has already also been mentioned, renewable energy, especially in Malawi, is one that is very immature. I mean, when you look at our first national energy policy that came out in 2003, it barely mentions renewable energy, and that it wasn't only until 2018 where we stepped in and supported the revision of the energy policy that the country as a whole started to really truly focus on renewable energy. And this is some of the work that we will continue to do, especially in our programming and the Africa Mini-Grids program. Some of the work that we're doing is very vital to that, because we're looking at developing viable business models, innovative business models for our mini-grids to make them financially sustainable. So, and some of the de-risking work, again, still very new, still trying to get stakeholders to understand. But this is something that we definitely intend to carry through, even as we design a successor to our Access to Clean and Renewable Energy program. Edwin, perhaps you might want to step in as well.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Shami. So definitely not an answer, but more Nura, if you find someone who has an answer to your question about scaling up investment, let me know so I can share this with the rest of our partners. Where we have seen in Philippines, where we have seen UNDP playing a role towards scaling up really is to support an enabling environment. Philippines is very strong in terms of policy environment. You have all kinds of laws, regulations, strategy, action plan. This is very strong. But in terms of implementation, this is usually where things tends to go south. And this is what's giving the difficulty of entering into market. Any market in Philippines is difficult, but renewable energy is actually more difficult because there is more uncertainty. Of course, you have the tax holidays, you have the tax and incentives, you have a lot of those measures were supposed to bring in large-scale investment, but already because of the geography in the country of the Philippines, you have a lot of, I would say, natural barrier to expanding investment. De-risking, some of the countries were still, I would say, at the bottom of their development trajectory. You will still find IFI, who are ready to do the massive investment, and this is basically your de-risking strategy. But Philippines is going to be an upper middle income country. So by definition, the best that they can hope for is a loan for IFI to invest. On the other hand, this is a $400 billion economy, and most of it is in the hand of private sector. So where I think UNDP can do a better job really is to define what would be the business case for all of these dollars we're going to spend anyway in the economy to be directed towards renewable energy as a business opportunity. Over.
Colleagues, we have a number of questions that are in the chat, and we also have a few that are now coming in terms of wanting to take the floor to ask a question. We've also come to the end of the first hour. We're certainly willing to, hopefully our panelists are willing to spend a couple of additional minutes for a second round of questions. And so audience as well, I hope that you have the patience. Clearly, there's a lot of interest that's been coming up in the chat. There was one kind of series that I actually found quite interesting because it was very practical, and that was a number of questions that are coming up in terms of how to deal with the recycling kinds of issues. Are there any experience in recycling batteries that Kishigjar Karku had asked, as well as experience in selling carbon credits from reduction or emissions switching to renewables? Also a very interesting topic. And Inutu came up with a question about whether are there success stories in how to recycle solar panels and wind turbines. So sometimes we're so active in kind of building this market, we have to recognize that there's a whole recycling and what you do in terms of replacing of equipment. And I just wonder whether any of that has come up for you that you could make a mention of now. Edwina, are you nodding your head? I don't know if you want to mention in terms of some experience in the Philippines.
No, actually, we are also, one of the examples that I mentioned is exactly that. Investing small scale, in renewables, the problem of recycling is not there yet, because, we are talking about 250 households. But once you move into a larger scale, then it's going to be sort of a more practical problem, especially because of the geography in the Philippines, where you have those islands. Once you have those, putting the equipment in is already difficult. Now, taking it out when it has no longer an obvious value is something else. Even if the Philippines is actually very interested in pushing for a circular economy, the models are still not in place. I don't know if in Malawi there are practical examples, but Philippines this is actually UNDP's worry that the acquisition part is working well without too much of a plan to, when the life cycle of the battery is done, how do we make sure that this becomes an input for additional economic activity? but we are not there yet.
We had a request to take the floor from Stefan Gitonga. Stefan, are you still there? And would you be willing to ask your question? Well, if Stefan, if you are able to get to the floor later, we'll go ahead and ask it. But there were also.
Sorry, I think I was muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Please go right ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion. I wanted to ask a question in relation to the 52 projects you looked at from the evaluation office. Whether when you look at the overall work of UNDP in terms of upstream activities like policies and regulatory frameworks, vis-a-vis the downstream activities of deploying technologies like the ones Malawi and Philippines have explained, whether you see the issue of balancing those two and how we can amplify the development benefits. Because that's some of our projects have both downstream and upstream activities. For some have downstream, others are upstream. So I just wanted to see whether you can speak to that aspect of balancing to ensure that we reach, we reach everybody. Everybody is not left, and nobody is left behind. At the same time, we amplify the development dividends. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please, Ben, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I think this is within the paper. Lesson 4 is the one that I think speaks to this the most, which is deciding when to demonstrate. So UNDP's downstream investments are often very key, as the evidence that would create that upstream change. And I think, and most country offices, as you mentioned, are working on both at the same time. But really, it's the success of this of the downstream example that gives, say, the government the confidence and investors in confidence to change this enabling environment. So I think, in terms of balance, I think they both go hand in hand. What we flag in this paper is certain examples, and perhaps they're from a little while ago, whereby the demonstration site has not been successful for a number of reasons, and some of them very practical logistical things around, and some of it during COVID in terms of bringing in technologies, and that's actually impacted the enabling environment work that was intended to happen as well, because it hasn't been possible to get this demonstration site off the ground within the project within the project timeframe, and perhaps there wasn't any continuation of funding to ensure it was, and so the enabling work has fallen away. So I think in terms of balance, it's deciding when a demonstration site is needed. So, for example, in this, I think Shimiso would agree in this example where World Bank is taking on the national mini grid requirements. I think it would safe to say that those policy change only came about because of the work that had been done, on off grids in 3 or 4 sites from UNDP. So they go hand in hand, but it may not also be necessary to have that demonstration site if there is enough interest already, and it might prove difficult to kind of deliver successfully within the project timeframe.
So, colleagues and participants, I'm conscious that we've run a little bit beyond the first hour for this, and so there's been a great number of good ideas that have come up in the chat. You're certainly, this is an ongoing conversation, and we welcome everybody to go ahead and continue to engage with our team and Ben, who put this together, and of course Edwin and Shimiso for their inputs on this, because we're all working at how to make sure that we can successfully deal with this energy access issues We appreciate all of the notes that have come up in the chat, which we're very happy to go ahead and we'll ask Ben to do some response. And I know, Shamiso, you've already been providing some responses in the chat, so we'll try to reach all of those questions further. But I think at this stage, we probably need to wrap up and let all of you get back to some of your other activities for UNDP. On behalf of the UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, we really appreciate your participation. And thanks again for Shamiso, Edwin, Ben, and all of the colleagues who were able to present today to bring this next reiteration of the energy access piece to your attention. Thank you, and I think we'll sign off there. Best to all of you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.